winning public data visualization expert and open government advocate. In 2011, he co-founded BudgIT, Africa's leading fiscal transparency and data visualization organization with presence in 5 African countries, reaching over 25 million citizens, and has also supported over 45 civil society organizations and public institutions. Seun has worked to strengthen fiscal transparency across the continent, building a reputation as an advocate for public sector efficiency, civic innovation, and active citizenship. Mr. Onigbinde is a recipient of over 20 international awards and affiliations, including the World Economic Forum Young Global Leader, Obama Foundation Scholar at Columbia University, Stanford University Draper Hill Summer Fellow, Aspen New Voices Fellow, to mention just a few. An alumnus of the Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, he holds an executive certificate from Stanford University, and he's a graduate as well of the Graduate Business School on Social Entrepreneurship, and he's currently a scholar of the International Public Practice at George Washington University. He's an author of The Existential Questions, a narrative of critical decisions required to uplift Nigeria. Seun is married to Oluseun Onigbinde, and they are blessed with 3 daughters. Please put your hands together as we welcome the CEO of BudgIT, Mr. Seun Onigbinde, to the platform.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. And I want to first thank Pastor Pojo Yemade and Pastor Toyo Yemade for inviting me once again. The last time I spoke at the platform was 8 years ago. My daughter was born, I think, 2 weeks before, so she's 8 years now. So I always take that as a very strong marker. And I've been attending the platform for quite a while with a friend, Sukon Miyagbe Meji, the days in TBS. So I'm also a member of the Covenant Nation. So it feels so much at home to speak today. And I'll be speaking a lot about democracy and people. And I know I've loved what Kola said. The climate change work, the great stories of Mr. Adeni. But I want to talk to you about a concept that we must take home today. When we talk about democracy, we don't see it from a broad perspective. And the topic for today is really proper because we say democracy and free market economy. And I want to take some principles from the free market economy to bring some understanding of how we should think about democracy. And these principles are not new. It was in a conversation with Dr. Obi Ezekwesili while we were in Berlin for some conversation around that led to the creation of the SPPG. And it was about what you call the trinity of the market system, or what you call the arometa. I don't want to start doing it incantations. I know that will not be acceptable. But what you call the trinity of the free market system, which you would say in basic economic terms, you have the supply side and the demand side, which means that is what creates a market. But there is always one single element in there, which Kola also mentioned. We talked about must be an institution that is regulating the relationship between the demand side and the supply side. Which means for you to have a functional market, every single element must act responsibly and must act properly if you are going to have a functional democracy. And that same principle you have from the free market is what you get in the democratic system, where citizens, the people of a society, the business-oriented people form the crux of the demand side. They are the ones to ask questions, to make demands, to say no, and to say a whole lot of things, to talk. They are the ones to demand in the democracy. Then you have the supply, to supply services, supply goods, to supply laws that guard the regulation of how all of this works. Then there is the institution there. And that institution is like INEC, the police, the military, institutions that are supposed to act as regulating that same space. But what do we have in Nigeria? we have the supply side, which is the government, has tried to take the space of everybody. So, you have the institutions are no longer acting as institutions. They act like they are extensions of the government, of the supply side. You have the demand side, even not understanding its own space, what you call civic space in the democracy. It does not own its space. It does not carry its weight. It's fearful, it's challenged. It goes under the rock whenever a single threat or a single case is made against it. So you have that the supply side takes the space of the institutions. That's why you see someone will be a minister and say, oh yeah, stand up, go and bow to the president. And everybody stands up. Not understanding that we are an institution that are supposed to stand independent and our voice is supposed to be strong and regulate the interaction within the space. So when we even talk about why is the dollar strong, why do people believe in the United States, it's not because everybody cares about the president of the United States. It is the strength of the institutions. Institutions where people will look and say, I can't just do this, I have to step aside. I can't just accept this, I can't just do this. And so the abuse of our democracy, or why we have felt our democracy has not worked, is because the institutions that are supposed to regulate the framework of our democracy has been weakened over time. And the reason is we are trying to say we want to defend democracy. We cannot defend democracy. We have to strengthen the institutions of democracy. And until you strengthen the institutions of democracy, it will not work as it should. Until INEC is not just neck, but it is truly independent neck. Until the police understands that I'm not the police of the government, I'm the police of the state. Until the military understands that, well, we have a commander-in-chief, but our loyalty is to the constitution of the country. That is when you say you have a democracy, because everybody in the system lives by the rules. But what everybody else tries to do is to take a step above the rules. I will tell you a small story. I was a technical advisor in the government for 2 weeks, and a lot of people would think I never took that role, and I resigned after some time. I was thrown into the cauldron, and I thought I could not even stay beyond that. And I remember there was a story. I was in my office. The minister created a small office for me, and the DSS officer came to meet me, and he locked the door, and he had a gun with him. So I was afraid. I said, well, we are in the ministry, so I think I should be safe here a little bit. Then he said, sir, I want to apologize to you. I said, DSS officer, apologize to me. And I forgot to tell you something that you told me to tell you, and this. And I said, you can forget. But something dawned in me, and because I was just 2 weeks in that, this is how people think of systems, where the entire architecture of system now grovels to them. And maybe that's where all we want to be. That's why many times when I even walk into the office, even in that 2 weeks, everybody is standing up, good morning, sir, good morning, sir, good morning, sir. We have not made institutions work as it should be. And because institutions are not working as it should be, rights and the freedom of people are not protected. So anybody can write a letter to police, and police will arrest the person because he has power, because he's connected. We can't call that democracy. It says man's capacity for justice makes democracy possible, but man's inclination for injustice makes democracy necessary. By Kyle Nibro. And the reason is that for us to protect those freedoms and the rights and the liberties we have in a democracy, it is because institutions work as it should be, because the rights of the people are protected. A few weeks ago, there was a young journalist that wrote a story about the office of the SDG, giving money to a restaurant to build a classroom. The classroom was not built. It was poorly built. And the next thing, without any form of notice, without any level of invitation, this boy was arrested. And for 4 days, we were looking for him. Daniel Lujuku. His mom figured out that he was in Panti, and one day he was found himself in Abuja. And for doing his own constitutional duty, because the Constitution says the media shall continue to hold the government accountable. And the police did not think it through that this is a journalist doing his constitutional duty. And until you now had social media and a whole lot of pressure all around before it was released. That cannot be how we run our democracy. Our democracy must be about protecting the rights or the freedom of people. Because if we cannot talk, we cannot call it a democracy. You don't need a democracy to build roads. You don't need a democracy to build bridges. In fact, Third Mainland Bridge was not built in a democratic setting. Am I right? I mean, how many things have we built that is as big as Third Mainland Bridge? The LNNG, that is the biggest driver of dividends for the federal government today, was not built in a democracy. It was not started in a democracy. So China has moved 800 million people out of poverty. They did not have a democracy. So to the idea that you have democracy and it will guarantee development is something that is supposed to be, but it has not been so. But the basics that democracy should give us is that we must be able to have our rights protected and our freedom of speech protected. Because what we have done is that in a proper democratic setting, it should create an opportunity to discuss, like Pastor Poju said, that we can create an accountable system. The reason why democracy does not guarantee development is because it lacks accountability. And believe me, any system that has accountability will get development. Any system where anybody can take $1 billion, $2 billion, $10 billion, put it in his pockets, launder it around systems, that system cannot get development. So you look at Rwanda or you look at China and you say, oh, I love this country. It's because there is accountability. You don't have poor people and rich governments. You don't have everybody changing brand new cars every 4 years. Whereas to change a minimum wage takes almost over a year. You don't have the choice of the people because the system is accountable. It gets much more paramount. Roads, schools, hospitals gets much more built. Not people feeling like this is my own time for another level of luxury. And that's why if this democracy would work, it is because it must be founded on equity and accountability. If it's not accountable, if the people have no right to discuss it, to challenge it, to talk about it, we can't get the kind of results that we want. And we are the ones failing at it. Because I've started with an analogy that we have a triangle. We have the demand side, but we are not challenging the system enough. Because at the first instant of pushback, at the first questioning, we say no, we don't want to talk about it. We say no, my social status will be affected. We say no, my security is not guaranteed. And at the end of the day, everybody chooses to do what they like. I mean, we had an anthem that stood for how many years? And the anthem was changed within 5 hours of debates. Half of the National Assembly members were not even in the room. And we just accepted it. Today I was reading that the National Assembly said that same anthem is riddled with errors, grammatical errors. Because we're not questioning anything. A democracy that works must be founded on citizens being vibrant, being open enough to ask bold questions. And if it's also going to work, it also means that accountability will not just start at the top, the biggest mistake we keep making. Accountability will start from the bottom. It will start from the local environment. And the mistake we have made over the years and why we find this defective system and why it has never worked is because our democracy is not local enough. You know when elections are coming, you know how local things can be. Am I right? There's Ankara, there's soap, there's biscuits, there's to match Geli, Abi. There are songs that you will sing and say, this is nice. There are shirts, everything looks like a fanfare. You know, our democracy is close to babacracy, And if you stretch it, it's like idolatry, People just worship and grovel. And the reality is that we know how to keep it local. We know how to campaign local. Even the places where development did not get to, ballot boxes, they get to the place. Am I right? But the reality is that our democracy is not strong because the local component, which is the local government systems, is extremely weak. The state governments made it weak. They stripped it of independence. They stripped it of certainty. So we don't even know. When you local government chairman, someone can sit in the assembly and say, I've sacked all the local government chairman. Someone does an election, and it is my party that has won every local government positions. And somehow we are not even studying what the local government chairman does. I mean, the same democracy, same presidential system that we copy. If anybody has studied the US presidential system, we know that you likely don't have any business with the federal government except for tax refunds. That's the truth. In the US, why would you have your business with the federal government? Because the school that your children will go to is managed by the local county system. The sanitation program is managed by the local county system. If you're possibly on health insurance, to be the state health insurance program, maybe that the federal government is contributing to. So what is your business? In fact, people will tell you that you're likely, how expensive their house is based on the quality of the schools around it. But so even if I live in Banana Island, I cannot send my children to a school around Banana Island. We have built a defective system, and somehow we want it to work. And so the only reason why it must work is that we have to participate in it. Democracy will not work until we participate in it. Democracy will not be effective until we are involved in it. And how do we participate? The reality is that we're not participating because we think when we vote in the election, that's over. But the unfortunate thing about voting is that everybody votes below himself. You know, there was a quote by Chesterton. I've been studying a Catholic philosopher in recent times called G.K. Chesterton. And he spoke about that it's only the minority of a voter that votes. Because a voter might not vote with his head, might not vote with his legs, might only vote with his mouth. What am I going to eat? So the whole of your body is not voting. So it's not just the minority of the electorate voting, it's because the minority part of the voter is what actually goes there. So we know that we even vote. But what do we do beyond voting? And that participation is what is missing. We think participation is meant for civil society organizations. We think participation is meant for activists. We think participation is meant for the media. No. A democracy that is functional means every single person is involved. You speak up, you engage. If I ask you a question, how many of you have even tried to write a letter to your State House honorable member? How many of you have even tried, to write a letter to your House of Rep member? Say, sir, for this road that is bad, it's a federal road, I want you to pay attention to it. I would prefer that this road is captured into the budget. How many of you have tried to even find out projects in your community in the budget and take an extra 1 hour on every Saturday to say, this is my civic duty Saturday, to find projects in my community, to know the allocations? How many of you know the allocations? Like Kalumojo local government, they get over 10 billion naira every year. We don't pay attention to those things because we passively participate, or we are outsourcing our participation. And that's why I want to push you through that. For our democracy to work, we must build ideal, active citizens. And my work in the last 12 years has been driven about why citizens must step up to do things right. You know, we've created significant tools. My work in the last 10, 12 years is breaking down information, simplifying it, giving it to the people. But how do we make that mainstream? We build solutions. We have a website called BudgIT that allows people to access government projects, federal government budget. In fact, we now even simplified it into a dashboard so that I cannot have an excuse that I don't know projects in my community. So you can search in the dashboard and say, I'm looking for this project, this community, under this ministry, and you find it. We even left that. So, okay, maybe that's difficult for you. You can track projects in the projects. You can track projects and choose your communities and say, how do I track public projects? How many of you have found, and I know we have a lot of followers on social media too, and a lot of people that use us and they are in the community. How many of us have tried to track public projects to say, this road, I will take a picture and I will make sure that I upload it, I will send a picture of it to say, this school was not properly built. Because what do you get to see? You get to see aberrations in the budget. You get to see like an Institute of Marine and Oceanography that is building classroom toilets. That is Nigeria. You get to see a border communities and development agencies that is building road in an urban center. That has nothing to do with borders. But are we involved? Or how many of us have learned about tracking primary healthcare systems? How many of us have tried to look for our state budget? Because I hear that complaint. There are no state budgets. I cannot see my budget to track. But there's data for that. In the last 5, 6, 7 years, the World Bank has funded a project called SIFTAS, where they give states money to be more open and accountable, and at 4 states, with the work of people like BudgIT, to release all their public budget data and their performance report every quarter. And many of us have tried to even go into these platforms and see what is happening in there. Or, the most important part to me is GovSpend that we built, relying on the data from the Accountant General. Every single government spending is on GovSpend. We built that platform to make sure that you can track allocations, not just allocations, actual spending of government, amounts being paid into contractors. Or what we build on mid.budget.com, where you can see allocations, and anybody that follows mid.budget.com knows that you get email alerts every single month once federal allocations are being paid. So you know how much you set your local government, you set your state. So you know how much comes into your state, how much comes into your local government. How many of us have paid attention to things like that? And there are so many tools by Yaga on elections, so many tools by Connected Development or Follow the Money, so many tools built by the civil society to get you involved in democracy. There's Plaque that has a tool called Plaque Bills Tracking Platform, so you can even download bills before they go mainstream. But the reason why this democracy is not working is not because our leaders have issues. They have their issues. But the side of the triangle, the space that we are supposed to occupy as citizens, we have failed to do so. We have left it to a certain set of people. We still assume that we are still in a military era where you require 1 or 2 or 3 people. You know, it's like the Bible, when the Bible says the veil of the temple was torn open, so we all have entrance. That's what democracy gives us. Democracy brings all of us into the play and makes us have a footing to discuss and to build that engagement. But my last point to you today is not just about that. My last point is that we need to build a new cohort of people, a new group of people that are challenging systems. Governor of Anambra is here. Who are the people of Anambra that would look at his policies and form themselves into a group and engage him on data, on evidence about what is happening? Lagos, we're all in Lagos. Many of us are paying attention to the budgets, the finances, to allocations in Lagos, and questioning on that. The new cohort of people, which we call community champions, and you can follow us on Instagram, we call them community champions _. You would find them there where we are trying to sensitize them that pay attention to how public resources are managed, because that is how we change the system. But beyond that, it means that we must also build a new people that say, a new army of people that does 3 things. That says it's enough, that asks questions, and says no. There was a story in the last election in the US which underscores the strength of institutions. There's a man who was the Secretary of State of Georgia. His name was Brad Raffensperger. So the President of the United States calls him during the elections. He says, you know, guy, I'm struggling here. They're doing electoral votes counting. And it's a redacted call. I just need 11,000 votes somehow. 11,076 votes. If I get it, I'm sure I will be there. I will be close. Because you know how electoral system works in America. It's by collegiate votes. And the guy told him, no. We had an Abia State rec that said no. We had an Adamawa rec that sat in the middle of military people and police and everybody, and he said, yes. Democracy must be about a quantum of people saying no. How many of us will say no to corruption? How many of us will say no to abuse? How many of us will say no to waste? I spoke to a government institution a few days ago and says, can we have your honorarium? I said, I don't take honorarium from government. I said, I don't. And many times I've gone to see government people and everybody wants to try to give you an envelope and say thank you. I said, no, I don't take it. You can give that back to a lot of people who need it more. You can put that money to buy an extra another box of books. Because we have a lot of people who don't say no. We have an anthem, we could not say no. We have an EIA, we have a project that is a $1 trillion project, no EIA report that is public. I mean, Heathrow, they are trying to add a runway for over almost decades now. And the people in the community said, no. We are not going to add that runway because we have had enough in that environment. Because that is democracy. If it is not participatory, if it doesn't aggregate the voices of the people in the process, it is not democracy. And as you know that we are 25 years in, we can no longer call ourselves a nascent democracy. A 25-year-old baby is no longer nascent. He can get pregnant, am I right? And he can have a awful baby. So we are coming to a point where we are adulting already as a democracy. So it's extremely important that we step up into our role as active citizens. What Nigeria is not in short of ethical, active citizens who are courageous and bold enough to say no, who are asking the right questions, not just us going on social media. I see a lot of people say we are emotive, we're very emotional. I love it. It gives oxygen to the system. But let our emotion be driven by evidence. Let it be driven by data, so that we can actually build a system that is effective and that works. I want to say to you that in a democracy, there is nothing about democracy with too much institutions. The stronger the institutions of a democracy, the better it is. But democracy with too much government will lead us to tyranny. A democracy with too much citizens' power may lead us to anarchy. What we need is institutions regulating that system, and for citizens owning their space, standing their ground with a multitude that is huge and bold and courageous enough in trying and in difficult times to say no. Thank you very much.